There had always been an old house at the end of the street, in the farthest part of the neighborhood. I grew up hearing stories about it, but I never dared to go there. The older folks said the house was cursed, that something sinister lived there, something no one should encounter. What intrigued me the most was the story of a mirror that was inside that house, and, according to the legends, had the power to reveal what should not be seen. One day, while I was talking with some friends in the square, they started talking about the abandoned house. Some of the braver boys said they were going there that night. Despite feeling a knot in my stomach, I decided to join them. My curiosity was stronger than my fear, and I knew that if I didn't go now, I would never have the courage to go. As the sun set, we approached the house. The wind seemed stronger there, and the trees surrounding. The place swayed as if whispering something. The house was enveloped in a dense mist, and the peeling paint on the windows gave a sense of deep abandonment. The front door was ajar, as if it were waiting for us. We hesitated for a moment, but soon we entered. Inside the house, the air was heavy and damp, and the smell of mildew took over everything. The wood creaked under our feet as we advanced through the dark hallways. Every step we took seemed to echo in the deep silence, as if the house itself were watching us. We continued until we found a large room, which appeared to be what was left of an old hall. In the center of the room, there was a huge mirror with a golden frame, but dusty and worn by time. That's when one of our friends, Marcos, pointed to it and said, "That's the mirror. The one they say is wrong." The mirror reflected more than our simple reflection. I could feel that there was something strange in the air, a heavy energy. When I looked at the mirror, it seemed like it was reflecting the environment in a distorted way, as if time there was different. For a moment, I could no longer see my image clearly. Something in my reflection seemed to fade, until suddenly it disappeared completely. Everyone went silent. It wasn't normal. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't identify what it was. When I looked at the others, their faces were pale, and they seemed completely absorbed, as if they were hypnotized by the image the mirror showed. Marcos, with a strange smile on his face, began to approach the mirror more closely. He extended, his hand touching the cold, shiny surface. The instant he did that, the entire house seemed to tremble. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the room, and the candles we had lit instantly went out, plunging us into total darkness. "Marcos, what did you do?" I screamed, trying to understand what was happening. But he didn't answer. He was standing, still, with his eyes fixed on the mirror, as if he had been possessed by some unknown force. That's when we heard a sound, coming from the back of the house. A low whisper, almost inaudible. And then, the mirror shone again. But this time, the reflected image was no longer ours. It was something much more disturbing. In the mirror, we saw dark, deformed figures slowly approaching us. They looked like people, but they weren't. Their faces were distorted, with expressions of pain and suffering, and their eyes were empty, as if they were dead. I tried to look at my friends, but they were so fixated on it that they couldn't move. I felt like we were trapped in some sort of trance. Then I heard a voice coming from somewhere behind me. "You shouldn't be here." I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. My heart was pounding, and a sense of panic began to spread through my body. I looked at the mirror again, and this time, one of the distorted figures seemed to look directly at me. Its eyes, though empty, were fixed on mine, and in that instant, I knew I was in danger. I shouted to the others that we needed to leave, but no one responded. They were so absorbed that I knew I wouldn't be able to get them out of there. Desperate, I tried to pull Marcos away from the mirror, but he was motionless. I looked at the others and realized that they could no longer move. We were being drawn toward the mirror as if some invisible force was pulling us toward it. The feeling was unbearable, as if something were feeding off our energy. I didn't know what to do. Then one of the figures in the mirror smiled. Not a friendly smile, but something I can't describe in words. It was an expression of pure malice. Then, without warning, a cold, sticky hand emerged from the mirror and grabbed my arm. I felt like I was being pulled into the frame. panic overtook me, and I fought against the force trying to escape. I screamed, but the entire house seemed to absorb my cries. Suddenly, I heard the sound of hurried footsteps from outside. One of my friends, João, who had stayed behind, appeared at the door, his eyes wide with fear. "Get out of there!" he shouted. "I found a way out." He ran toward us, but it was too late. With a final tug, I was thrown out of the room and fell to the floor, gasping for breath. When I looked at the mirror again, the figures had disappeared, but the feeling that something had followed us remained. Running desperately, we left the house without looking back. The door slammed shut behind us, and in the next moment, the house was completely silent. We were out of that nightmare, but not completely free. In the following days, strange things began to happen. Marcos, who had seemed normal at the time, began to change. He no longer talked about what had happened that night and seemed strange, distant, as if something had been taken from him. At night, he seemed to hear whispers and murmured incomprehensible words while he slept. We all began to feel a presence watching us, a constant weight in the air. No one dared to return to that house. And no matter how hard we tried to move on, we knew that something had marked us that night, something that was waiting, something that should never have been released from the mirror. And every time I passed near that place, I could swear I saw a distorted reflection, watching us from the depths of the house, as if we had never left.